It's the 1940s. Somewhere outside Isfahan, a French philosopher is walking across the Iranian desert. He's not sightseeing. He isn't following a map. There's no guidebook in his hand. His name is Henry Corbin, and what he's searching for doesn't show up on any compass. He's looking for a world that most people don't believe exists. Not a new continent, not a lost city, a realm made of image. For Corbin, imagination wasn't a function of the brain. It wasn't something you used to escape the world. It was something you entered to perceive the real world behind the visible one. He called it the mundus imaginalis. Not fantasy, not delusion, not metaphor, but a real ontological space, a middle world, between spirit and matter, between intellect and sensation. In this realm, mountains speak in symbols, angels take shape, inner truths appear as outer landscapes. You don't think your way there. You see with something else. The soul. To most modern ears, that sounds poetic, maybe romantic, maybe strange. But to Henry Corbin, it wasn't poetry, and it wasn't strange. It was geography. A world as real as any desert, but made of symbol, presence, and meaning. And if you knew how to look, you could walk straight into it. When we hear the word imagination, we usually think of make-believe, kids playing dress-up, daydreams, fiction, something soft, something that disappears when the real world walks in. But Henry Corbin didn't see it that way. He believed imagination wasn't the opposite of reality, it was the doorway into it. In a world chasing data, proof and productivity, Corbin turned toward something older, myth, symbol, vision, not as fantasy, not as escape, but as encounter. To Corbin, imagination wasn't about creating things, it was about perceiving something that was already there, in between spirit and matter, in between thinking and seeing. He called this realm the mundus imaginalis, the imaginal world. And if it's real, as Corbin believed, then most of us are living in half a world. We've ignored the door and forgotten how to see. Welcome to Mantis Library, where forgotten worlds return and the imagination is taken seriously. To understand Henry Corbin, you have to start with a single distinction, one that most of the modern world has collapsed. Imaginary versus imaginal. The imaginary is what we all know, subjective, fictitious. It lives inside your head, a daydream, a fantasy, something that disappears the moment you open your eyes. But the imaginal, that's something else entirely. For Corbin, the imaginal is not an illusion. It's a dimension, a mode of reality just as real as the material world, but accessed differently. Not through the senses, not through logic, but through symbol, vision, and image. This idea wasn't new. Plato spoke of the forms, perfect archetypes beyond the physical world. Carl Jung spoke of archetypes too, living images buried deep in the psyche. Islamic mystics spoke of the barzakh, an intermediate realm between the world of bodies and the world of spirits. Corbin united them all. He argued that the imaginal world is where meaning takes form, where the soul sees, not metaphorically, literally. It's a world you can encounter in dreams, in visions, in symbols that feel like they're looking back at you. And it's not private, it's not yours. That's what makes it real. It doesn't belong to your ego. It's not made by will. It exists on its own terms, a realm between worlds, halfway between thought and flesh. In Corbin's view, the greatest mistake of modern psychology was to reduce all inner experience to the imaginary, to mistake symbolic perception for delusion and inner vision for hallucination. But the Imaginal doesn't distort the truth, it delivers it. To locate the Imaginal, Corbin turned to the Islamic mystics, especially Suhrawardi and Ibn Arabi. They called it the barzakh. Not a boundary, not a threshold, a place between places. Not this world and not the next, but a world in between. Suhrawardi, the philosopher of light, described it as the realm where spiritual realities take form, not abstract ideas, not metaphors, forms, appearances, shapes of meaning. The barzakh is where visions happen, not in the imagination, but in the imaginal. It's the realm of subtle bodies, where the soul speaks in image. Ibn Arabi went further. For him, the barzakh was essential to divine knowledge. God, being utterly beyond comprehension, could not be approached directly, but in the imaginal world, God could be seen, not as he is, but as he chooses to appear, in symbols, in dreams, in inner landscapes, as vivid and precise as anything we see with our eyes. This wasn't poetic language, it was topography. For Corbin, the mundus imaginalis wasn't a metaphor for the mind, it was a real ontological world, just in a different mode of being. Not up there, not out there, but right here, overlapped, interwoven, waiting. It's where angels dwell, where saints appear in dreams, where symbols are not signs of something else, but presences in their own right. The mistake modernity makes is thinking everything is either physical or imaginary. Corbin insisted on a third domain, the middle realm, the place of vision, of inner perception. And he wasn't guessing. He was following the map left by those who walked there. Corbin didn't see imagination as a toy. He saw it as a sense, not in the poetic sense, in the anatomical one. For him, imagination was an organ of perception, like the eye sees light or the ear hears sound. Except this organ doesn't perceive the physical, it perceives meaning, spirit, soul. He once wrote, "Imagination is not the opposite of reality, it's the door to the real." To modern ears, this sounds romantic. To Corbin, it was the physiology of the soul. And he wasn't alone. Carl Jung said something similar. In his method of active imagination, he invited patients not to escape their visions, but to enter them, dialogue with them, let the image speak, not as a metaphor, as a presence. When Jung spoke of Philemon, the winged bearded figure who appeared in his dreams, he wasn't fantasizing. He was practicing a lost discipline, a way of seeing with the inner eye. Christian mystics, Sufi visionaries, Buddhist contemplatives, they all knew this, that there's a kind of knowing that doesn't come from analysis, it comes from image, a flash of symbol, a felt presence. We've been taught to dismiss this, to treat the imagination as unserious, decorative, personal. But Corbin's entire life was a protest against that idea. For him, imagination was real contact with the imaginal world. The same way as a telescope lets us see stars, imagination lets us perceive symbolic truths, things that exist but not in space. The tragedy of modern life, Corbin said, is that we've confused imagination with illusion. We closed the eye and then declared the world flat. But the inner world didn't disappear. We just stopped looking. Most of us were taught that if you talk to someone who isn't physically there, you've lost touch. Corbin would say, maybe you've just begun. The imaginal world isn't empty. It's populated, not by fantasies, but by presences, real, symbolic beings who appear in dreams, visions, meditations, not projections, not inventions, encounters. Jung had Philemon, a winged ancient figure with deep blue robes and golden eyes. He appeared in visions, spoke in riddles, corrected Jung when he strayed. Jung didn't believe he created Philemon. He believed he met him. Corbin had the angel of presence, a guiding intelligence that didn't just communicate, it illuminated. It wasn't out there, but neither was it in here. It was somewhere else, in between, in the imaginal. Islamic mystics called this realm the Malakut, a world where angels and spiritual forms dwell. It's not metaphor, it's not dogma, it's lived experience, and it demands reverence. These figures don't flatter you, they don't obey you, they initiate, challenge, correct. You don't command them, you prepare for them, through receptivity, through stillness, through inner listening. To enter the imaginal world is not to daydream, it's to make oneself available, like the ancients did when they stepped into the temple or the cave. Modern minds might scoff, but the mystics and the psychoanalysts say otherwise. These presences are not proof of madness, they're signs of contact. You can't force your way into the imaginal. It doesn't open to pressure, only to presence. Corbin taught that access to the mundus imaginalis comes not through analysis, but through symbolic attention. You don't arrive by thinking harder, you arrive by seeing differently. Dreams are the most common portal, not because they're irrational, but because they suspend literalism. They speak in images, they teach in riddles, and if you listen with the right kind of ear, they begin to echo. Meditation, contemplation, solitude, these are not empty rituals. They clear space, they loosen the grip of logic, they make room for another kind of seeing. In Sufi practice, Sama, the listening, is a spiritual technique, not just hearing music, but receiving it, letting it move through the body, through the soul. Poetry becomes prophecy, art becomes invocation. Jung called it active imagination. The point wasn't to create fantasy, it was to follow the image, wherever it led, not to control the vision, but to accompany it, to stay with it long enough for it to speak. You don't walk into the imaginal like you enter a room. It opens when you align with its rhythm, not yours. That's why Corbin saw the imaginal as luminous, not linear. It's not a place with coordinates. It's a shift in mode, from problem solving to soul hearing. And once you learn to hear that mode, it's hard to unhear it. The imaginal world isn't just strange, it's salvific. For Henry Corbin, the mundus imaginalis wasn't a museum of symbols, it was a path of return. Not return to childhood, not return to fantasy, but return to the soul's original mode of knowing. In this realm, the soul remembers who it was before it fragmented, before it was reduced to data, roles, diagnoses. In the imaginal, the soul isn't analyzed, it's seen, re-seen, through myth, through symbol, through the figures that carry its deeper story. Corbin often spoke of the soul's orient, not a place on a map, but a direction of meaning. In the imaginal, the ego dissolves, and the soul turns toward its source. This is the reunion, the lover meeting the beloved, not metaphorically, mystically. Jung intuited the same movement. In active imagination, you don't fix the psyche, you enter its landscape, you walk with it, and if you're willing to listen, it shows you what it needs. Not always with words, often with image. To modern psychology, this may sound unnecessary, poetic perhaps, but to Corbin, this was the real healing. Not coping, not optimizing, but remembering. Redemption isn't abstract. It has a shape, a color, a presence. The imaginal shows it to you, if you're willing to see. Maybe you've already been to the imaginal, not in some distant trance, but in a dream you still remember, even after 10 years, in the way a symbol once stunned you, in the quiet that followed a question you didn't expect to ask. It wasn't fantasy, it wasn't fiction, it felt more real than anything. Corbin would say, that was it. You passed through the threshold, even for a moment. Most of us have glimpsed the imaginal without knowing it had a name, a scent, a shape, a gesture that felt impossibly familiar. Not invented, encountered, and then forgotten, pushed aside by speed and screens and certainty. But Corbin's work isn't nostalgia. It's not even philosophy in the modern sense. It's a kind of remembering, of a world the soul already knows. Not a new place, a lost one, and the door was never locked. In the end, Henry Corbin wasn't asking us to escape reality. He wasn't preaching mysticism for mysticism's sake, or rejecting reason, or telling us to abandon the world. He simply asked us to see with different eyes, not the physical ones, the ones behind them, the eye of the heart. Corbin believed that behind every form, every tree, every face, every flame, there's a presence, a pattern, a light trying to speak, not in language, but in image, and not just to the mind, to the soul. To live without the imaginal, he thought, was to live in exile, cut off from the true depth of things, not because it was hidden, but because we'd stopped listening. The mundus imaginalis isn't on a map. It doesn't appear in satellite photos or census data, but that doesn't make it less real. Reality as Corbin saw it was layered, and the most important realms aren't always the ones we can measure. They're the ones that move us, that mark us, that change the way we walk back into the world. Because what's unseen shapes what is seen, and sometimes the soul just needs permission to look. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share and subscribe. Until next time, take care of yourself, and we'll see you again in Mantis Library.